Let me invite our next panelist, Adli. So Adli spearheads Rombi's presence in the Middle East, Africa, and Turkey. He brings a wealth of experience in telecom, innovation, automation, having held senior roles at corporates like Huawei, Motorola, ITS. So outside of work, Adli enjoys football and basketball. So thanks, Adli, for joining us. So Adli is going to do a little bit of a free flow discussion. Say, some of the pictures that Rami shared in terms of some of the solutions were will be very helpful for a lot of participants. So coming back to Adli. So Adli, first point that we wanted to discuss is, what are some of the disruptions that you have observed and felt amidst this COVID-19 environment from a Rombi perspective?
Okay, thank you, Gopal. Thank you, everybody. And my name is Adli Dhaliya. I look at, as been introduced by Gopal, Rombi. And at Rombi, we actually look at, we're very much into visibility. And visibility for us means things that are moving. If you have anything moving across the world, if it's in the sea, in the air, or on land, or if it's inside a warehouse, right? Basically, either an asset movement or a shipment movement. Anything related to that is our specialty. And at Rombi, the way we are doing that is we're giving a service similar to Uber. So we make it easy for people to subscribe and use the service that we have on demand and get basically data and information about their goods and the movement of their goods, the stoppages, and what have you, right? So at Rombi, we are very much specialized at data. So we collect data, we provide devices, we provide a platform, we collect data, and then we analyze and predict. And that's a very important aspect if you look at what we have been discussing today. Now, thanks, Rami. It was a very informative presentation. So Rami focused more on what happens inside the warehouse. And the disruption today, there are things happening in warehouses, and there are things happening at lanes and routes and airports and what have you, right? So I want to try to really focus toward that today and talk about what we are noticing and what we're seeing. Simply today, we think, the supply chains has been disrupting. The goods are stuck somewhere en route. Nobody knows where. Just to give a small example, if you have a charter flight, a cargo flight today happening, leaving at a specific time from DXB airport, and for whatever reason, you missed it by 1 hour, then look at the implication that would happen on your delivery of your goods. Means, I'm sure this goods supposed to arrive somewhere and then supposed to take another flight. It could be scheduled or it could be ad hoc, as Gopal was explaining. And due to the missing the first flight, you have no visibility what will happen next and when is the next return will come for you. So the effect for us has two parts. Is basically amplification and cascading. It's going to get more and more difficult. So unpredictability is becoming high. So things that we are noticing with the current norm, as we say, is demand is rising and falling depending on various industries. You cannot predict like before. Just to give you a small example, what happened with the toilet paper case, at the beginning of COVID, right? Suddenly there's a spike of demand and people are looking for extra storage and what have you. And once things are back to normal, you have lots of material in storage. Now, the good thing about it here, it was with no expiry date, but imagine if it's something else that has expiry date. So that's one thing. The second thing we've noticed also, the consumer consumption pattern have changed. Sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad, right? So that's a second way that we see that we have to deal with. and accordingly goods are now, expectation and consumptions have changed for that. Now, a third thing that we've seen also that because of goods are spending more and longer time en route, if you have a cold chain goods, then excursion can becomes a higher risk for you, right? Because they could be left somewhere in a tarmac on an airport or somewhere without the proper condition that normally they need, right? The temperature, the humidity, and what have you. So spoilage is more vulnerable. We can see more spoilage happening as we go. Similarly to what we call the higher value goods. Higher value goods are spending more time either on routes or ports or airports. And because of that, they have higher risk of being stolen. So all this has to be considered now as the new norm that we have. So, we call the time is the time of uncertainty. So this is how it is, and this is how we need to deal with in the coming future. And at Rombi, what we are trying to do, we actually collect a lot of data. Now, unfortunately, if you have collected data previously, it does not mean today anything for you. So a lot of companies over the years have collected, tons of data. These tons of data were based on scheduled flights, based on good routes and what have you. As we speak, this data is not usable for them. They need a fresh set of data. And this data has to be, as we speak, it has to be real time. So basically they can build their understanding and accordingly react to the disruption that's happening in the supply chain. So this is how we see in things in Rombi from the prospect of disruption that we observed and felt so far.
Yeah, thanks, Adli. I think very relevant point is, I keep saying the supply chains pre-COVID are actually not going to be the same as what it is post-COVID. So this is essentially very true when you talk about the data pre-COVID that you collected is certainly not going to be the same now or after. There will be a big difference. In fact, in one instance, and when we're looking at, for example, if you were, even from a warehousing perspective, if somebody who had a trade lane of 100% from China pre-COVID, today, like even Rami was mentioning earlier, there have been companies which have shifted from China to Southeast Asia, for example, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and even India. So there is already supply chains have shifted to the extent of maybe even 50 to 60%, from China, which consequently makes a lot of prior data, which is actually not very meaningful. So I think those are very valid points. Now, how do you see, I think, like you rightly started mentioning about Rombi, so anything that moves, is your target from a visibility perspective, right? Whether it is from a transportation perspective or whether it is in a warehouse and so on. So how do you see from, of course, you have already been one of the key disruptors as far as, the visibility angle is concerned. But otherwise, how do you see maybe some of the changes in the industry landscape, specifically when we talk about transportation, logistics, and even, intralogistics or materials handling? How do you see the landscape changing?
It's very clear to everyone that, after COVID or during COVID, there will be winners and losers at all levels, right? So the issue here is this will happen faster than ever. So if it took companies like 1 year to fail before, it might take much shorter time to happen now, okay? So everybody has to look at it. And if you have been dealing with a partner, if you have been dealing with a third 3PL or a transporter or a shipper, a time has come that you need to look at the survivors and look at the successful ones. Of course, to do that, you cannot just pick and say who's going to be surviving, but you need to do your homework You need to work, look at your business, look at the lanes that you are using, the transporters that you're using, and then study and make a very quick and agile, a decision on, are you going to stick with your existing one? Are you going to change? And if you're changing, what is the reason for that? Of course, anybody making a decision could, in quick fashion, without having the actual data and the information, can be making a wrong decision. So it's always, a chance of doing that. But what we feel, if you have the right data, augmented with information about the public. Just to give you an example, we have helped companies, working in certain geographies, because we normally link to marine system, we link to airline systems, we link to in-country systems, security systems. All this data we bring into our solution, and we make predictability much better. What does that mean? When you are shipping from point A to point B, we can tell you that you need to do it through this lane or that lane. The reason is because we are expecting more delays. You mentioned, Gopal, in your presentation at the beginning, that there are shortage of resources sometimes in the borders. There are shortage of resources in airports, ports, and that's basically making the dwell time sometimes much longer, and makes your goods being lost or staying in a wrong location for a very long time, right? How do you really mitigate that? By understanding the whole supply chain and understanding previous shipments, where they have stayed and how long they were faster, by whom, by which lane, by which shipper, and so on. This information can give you a wealth of data to basically make your decision who's your next partner. And mind you, I could be, partner X could be doing much better with pharma goods rather than with any other material, and so on. There's no one way for everybody, because different people do different things in a different way. So again, data, meaningful data, a fresh data will always make you make a better decision on how to do that. Now, at Rombi, because we have a 724, what you call B Central. B Central is our control tower, and it has also a human touch, which means there are people who's going to tell you, if you're doing a shipment from Shanghai to Dubai, then we see that on our system, the best way to do it is to go through X or Y, right? This is how it can be really more usable and more effective for companies today to manage the landscape and what's happening in front of them. This is how we see it from our angle, and this is what we noticed so far. In some countries, there are closed circuits, like, today as we speak, we know there are, in Saudi Arabia, there are zones that being closed and no people is around to come out or in. Same thing in UAE and so on. So by understanding that, by having this data available for a shipper who's shipping from somewhere, he can basically make a better decision on how to ship his goods and which route. That's how the landscape will change. Again, data, understanding, more information, and this will allow you basically to make a better decision.
Yeah, very, very true, Adli. I think that the data and information and the more relevant part of it in a more current sense is actually very essential from the changing landscape perspective. And now that we are getting closer to the scheduled time, I just wanted to share some closing perspectives and then move on to some of the questions that people have been posing. So a few perspectives in terms of closing remarks. Definitely I'll be going back to Rami and Adli for some final points. But we have been running our sessions on COVID implications under the concept of respond, reset, and rebound. Now, if you look at it from a respond, reset, and rebound perspective, today, what is important from a respond perspective is immediate actions in the form of ensuring workforce safety, set up quick response teams, and also most important thing is to fulfilling, respond to fulfilling capacities. Today, like Rami was mentioning and also was Adli was mentioning, capacity is actually quite a bit of a challenge. So for any customer, I think most important to find the capacity. Resetting in terms of evaluating options to get better visibility in terms of the advanced freight booking so that you have actually a little bit of visibility for the next 2 quarters, understand the diversifications in terms of the supply chain and also adapt to digital connectivity solutions like both Rami as well as Adli were mentioning. And from a rebound perspective, it is important, to identify what are some of the future industries. For example, Rami was sharing some areas which went up in terms of food, pharma, e-commerce, 3PL, new fulfilling players, and some of the other traditional industries seeing a lower demand, right? And also most important thing is to create flexible solution model. Today, you cannot go into the market with a very rigid solution model. And most important thing is to prepare for a contingency plan. Finally, some of the transformation you need to embrace. Firstly, digital is a new reality. I think it is very important. The fact that we have also been able to just quickly convene all of us together and share this insight, and this conversation itself proves how relevant digital has become today. There's marketplace everywhere. And like Adli was mentioning, there is so much of data that logistics industry is known to churn out. But rather than looking at those data as from a historical perspective and looking at it as a dashboard, it is important to look at things from a futuristic perspective and enable predictive analytics in your overall business. And also today, there is so much of autonomous solutions, whether it is intralogistics or micro solutions using drones, etc., that is coming out, and also rise of the digital platforms. Today, digital platforms are aimed at cutting down the intermediaries and also to get a better, quicker perspective in terms of the demand, so that like Adli was mentioning, it takes a shorter amount of time for you to actually collapse in such an environment, so that a better visibility of the demand helps in lengthening that process and also give you time for you to hit back and grow. And finally, there is Uberization of logistics, which is basically aimed at trying to limit your capital investments, at the same time be more flexible in offering your solution. So with those summary points, maybe let me just move to Rami for a final quick 30-second response. What do you see, Rami, as the top 3 changes that you would anticipate in, let's say, the intralogistics business in the post-COVID world?
Okay. Thank you, Gopal. Frankly, we're witnessing an increased amount of online orders simply because COVID even pushed most to go online, although some of the population was not doing that. Mainly the younger generation were ordering a lot online. This fact now, I think, is here to stay. Companies have to relook into their intralogistics in a way to meet that capabilities, to meet that number of orders which is coming. Whether we like it or not, we were thinking it's going to come in a year or 2, but COVID accelerated it. So the 3 things I have to say are: work on your e-com, work on your intralogistics, and be ready to ship orders very quickly, within 4 hours and 6 hours. This is what I see.
I think that there are also some questions on the Q&A window, which is very relevant for you, Rami, from e-commerce perspective. Let me post that to you in a quick minute. So over to you, Adli. Adli, what do you see as your views on the top 3 changes, specifically in the post-COVID world from an overall industry perspective?
Okay, I will take it from Rombi angle and our services to the market, right? First, I think we anticipate to be able to onboard clients faster than ever. You know, nobody's going to wait for 6 months to implement the system. We need to do it in days, right? And that's very important. The way the solution is, the way, as you said, it's like an Uber. You can do it in no time. So we can have a customer very quickly. Customers today call us and say, I want to monitor this shipment that goes day after tomorrow from here to somewhere. I want to be able to have him completely on the solution in a very few hours, right? Number two is I'm going to give him data, fresh data of what exactly happening with his shipments, where are moving. I look at his boards, lanes, transporters, and conditions is like his blood pressure, temperature, sugar rate, and so on, right? So these are the key heartbeats that I want to look at and accordingly advise. Going forward, we are actually collecting all of this data. Remember what you said, there's tons of data out there. Some are public data, some are very specific to the shipment. We are considering that. We have our Swarm AI solution that allows you to basically predict on your behalf what needs to be done next time, right? So it's a journey you take step by step. By the fourth level, we call it, you should be able to even predict without sensors, because you have enough history of what has happened with you and everyone else that you can tell what is the best way to take goods from A to B, right? And what type of goods. So that's how we are expecting things to move. And this is what we are striving to make our customers feel with, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Arli. I think those are very relevant points. So a quick wrap up from my end. If you know, the top three I would foresee as far from an overall logistics industry perspective is, one is there will be a practice of risk mitigation, because I think we have not been factoring in the point of risk into the business, because there is a high deal of reliability that we have been used to. Simple thing, you know, we try to call a person, send a text to somebody. If we don't get a response within 1 minute or 5 minutes, if we don't hear back on an email within 1 hour, we are like thinking whether the person is on leave, or it's like we have taken the reliability or pushed the reliability too far. I think so. It's important to practice risk mitigation, and also most importantly is also flexible solution models, because the capital will need to be optimized. There will be a lot of service providers who will be available, in the business for you to actually balance between capacity and capability. Customers will also want you to start offering to them significant flexibility. And finally, the geographic and vertical market focus that logistics service providers or the logistics industry and the supply chain business needs to focus on will shift. So which is in the form of, healthcare will become even more important, pharmaceuticals will become even more important, food industry becomes even more important, and so on and so forth. So those were some of the closure points. Let's just move to our questions. I think we are slightly 2-3 minutes behind schedule. Let's have a quick look at. There are a few questions, and then subsequent to which I'll pass it back to Daniel for wrap up. So let me just, I think there is one question. So there has been some appreciation, very interesting. We're looking for the presentations, and there is a thumbs up. So thank you so much. I think it is quite a good motivation. And Rami, I think this is probably for you. There is, you can expect a call from somebody concerned in terms of e-commerce order fulfillment. So which means there is some business opportunity coming your way. So, and there is one question which probably I'll pose it to you, Rami. What size companies should consider a complete or a partial automation? How long does planning and implementation take?
Again, there is no one size fits all in terms of automation. And a company like us that actually look at the current process and try to put a solution together, it is tailored to the size and the capacity and the throughput of that customer at the time. But what's very important is when we look at something, whether it's really very small automation a very small fulfillment facility, let's put it this way, because I look at the whole thing. We look at the automation part of it, and we look at the fulfillment process of it as well. What we do, or what everybody should be asking their consultants to do, is a roadmap. Because today you might have only 60 or 150 orders a day fulfilling. But in no time, and we've seen it, the moment you go more into deliveries and the moment you start advertising further your web services and your online shop, exponentially the growth is happening. And this is case after case. So the number starts 100, 150, they jump to 300, 300 becomes 600 orders, and an average small company would be shipping 700 to 1,000 sometimes in the region here. That's small company. So the best solution for that is to create a roadmap, meaning what if you go into this level of orders and this level of orders? If you are at this level of daily orders, then this type of automation or semi-automation can help you. And then the next level would be, we will take the existing infrastructure and build on what we've implemented and go into a second level, which can, for example, include faster movement, things like ASRS system or like robots that are able to do things faster. And that should be part of a roadmap, meaning you don't destroy what you have and you start from scratch. You actually build it one after the other. And that's very key to design your automation process. So there's no really small or big. It could be very manual at the very beginning, and then a roadmap can take you from manual to semi to fully automated.
Yeah, I think good response, Rami. So maybe one question over to Adli. So Adli, you have been tracking visibility from a movement of freight perspective. So have you seen any trend towards more of near sourcing and going local in this current environment as compared to how it was pre-COVID?
Yeah, actually, if I understood the question correctly, we've seen now that many of the shipping companies and some of the big logistics companies are offering the solutions that we have as a value add for their customers, simply because they want to give their customer the full accessibility to understand where their goods are and what the condition of their goods, right? So that's becoming very, as we see, we are really having a huge demand. As a matter of fact, we are maybe one of the lucky sectors that we see that with COVID, there are more demand into visibility, and people are looking at it from which angles, be it your customer that wants to have this for himself, or be it a shipping company that want to offer that kind of service for their customers. But yeah, the demand is increasing, and it's becoming more important. One thing that I want to mention, on top of what Rami just said, all these, trolleys and, new concepts that are being used now for distribution and what have you, also need visibility. One of the main issues we're solving, for example, in the US, because as you just said, that labor cost there is high, is all these trolleys, ULDs, what do you want to call them, are being tagged too. We tag them with beacons. We know where they are, how long they've been there. We know how to collect them from the locations they've been distributed to. That's a very important aspect into the supply chain, because if you run out of them at the source, then it becomes a problem actually ordering new and the time it takes to do everything else. So to improve and to have a better efficiency on the cost, we actually tag all these of ballots or what have you, and we tell you where they are, they dropped, which truck took them, which order was on them. All that integration we can do also together to basically complete the picture of what you're showing, which is, I think, interesting to look at together.
Yeah.
And maybe do a joint thing together.
Yeah.
Later.
Yeah. Certainly. Thanks, Charlie. I think that was a very, good response as far as, localization is concerned. There is one other question relating to localization, which is something probably I'll share a view on it. with most countries going local, is there an increase in demand for new warehouses closer to the consumption centers? That is, smaller decentralized warehouses versus earlier pre-COVID model of large centralized units. Now, this is one of the points I was mentioning in the sort of a call to action point about flexible or a rebound strategy on flexible solution models. When I was talking to some of the logistics service providers, one of them was mentioning the a flexible model from a warehousing perspective, saying today clients are coming in and saying, okay, previously the way it used to work is, I need, let's say, 20,000 square meters in Jabza or Kizad or Riyadh and so on. They were very specific on where they wanted capacity. Today, in the post-COVID environment or the COVID environment, they are running a risk of capacity which is actually in excess in some place and in some places where they don't have capacities. So consequently, they go to the service provider and say, look, at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, for UAE, I have a demand annually of about 40,000 square meters. It's up to you whether you want to place it in Kizad or Jebel Ali or any other location, but here are my service level commitments. So you meet this, and then you are flexible in terms of where you want to position. So this consequently will lead to multiple warehouses, in your question, and not so much on the centralized concept, which used to be in the past when people were relying more on economies of scale. And consequent to this, what will happen is also that the risk is actually getting shifted to the service provider. So that is one of the challenge for the service provider, but the service provider has the ability to actually place the location in a place which is more competitive from a cost perspective and not being forced to keep it near a consumption center or near a production center. They can get a more relevant location. But having said that, the risk then gets shifted onto the service provider. So that was I think one of the questions. Maybe I think I'll just take one final question and then pass it back to Daniel in the interest of time. So this probably, I think Rami will be more suited to answer. Human to robot, we can foresee in the near future, what is the ratio that you would envisage? So the question is, what's the human to robot ratio we can foresee in the near future? How quickly are the Middle Eastern players adapting to innovations and technology? I think the second part of it, I think briefly mentioned earlier in terms of how we are adapting to technology. I think the first part, what is your view on the ratio, Rami?
Just to define, because in automation, robots could be different things. We're talking about robots in logistics, things that will drive and walk and bring you shelf and all that. If we're talking about those types of robots, and they will eventually, somebody has to do still the job. So for example, if I'm a picker, I'm no longer walking and picking. I will stay put in one area. The robot will walk, bring me a shelf to me, and I'll pick from it, and I'll continue passing the order down on a conveyor belt. We used to be earlier, for example, 5 pickers doing the picking, but today we can have 1 picker doing the picking and 5 robots actually bringing the shelves. So the ratio on this type of robotization of the warehouse would be 1 to 5. In general, when we do an estimate and calculation, between 4 to 6 robots are needed for every picking or fulfilling station. So if you have a throughput that needs 4 fulfilling persons working, humans, then you need around 20 robots to bring you those shelves. And obviously here there's lots of things with the consequencing and how the software will stagger those robots to wait for me to pick from them and so forth. There's technicalities, but that's software wise. In general, it is 1 to 5, I would say, as a rule of thumb.
Yeah, I think that's a spot on answer anybody can get at this point. So thank you so much, Rami, and thank you, Adli. It has been a wonderful discussion. I think we brought out a lot of good points, visually showed people how some of the solutions are being put in place. I think that is a value for the time that people are spending with us right now, is they're getting something fresh, probably go back and try and execute and implement as far as their industries are concerned, as well as approaches and thinking, like Adli was saying, in terms of how the data needs to be used and so on and so forth. So thank you from my end to all the panelists. Let me pass it to Daniel. I think there is also a feedback. We would request the participants to fill in the feedback. So Daniel, over to you.
Gopal, thank you everyone. That was a wonderful session. I hope all our attendees enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Adli, Rami, for your valuable insights and time today. As Gopal mentioned, there is a short survey. Please give us your feedback. You'll see it on the text window to the right of your screen. Give us any feedback you can. It'll help us firstly convey that to our speakers, and for our team to create more useful content for you going forward. Um, I'd like to remind you that we're also facilitating meetings for all our attendees with our speakers today, Frost and Sullivan, Span Group, Ron B, as well as with our partners for SITL, Dubai South, and NAFL, which is the National Association for the UAE for Freight and Logistics. If you wish to avail this facility, our team will assist you set up meetings with our speakers, with the association, with Dubai South to help your business. You can fill those details in the attached survey as well on the right of your screen. The next webinar takes place on the 30th of June. We're looking at digital technologies. A lot of that was touched on today. Digital technologies and automation, and how they can be a part of your mitigation strategy for COVID-19. So a lot of the good points that were discussed by the panelists today will be continued in our next webinar. You will all receive an invite for this shortly. On behalf of Read Exhibitions and our speakers, once again, thank you all for attending. We hope you all stay safe.
Thank you.
And goodbye. Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.